It's time for another round of
PatGPT.
All right, our topic today is how to get into an MBA program. Now, this is a big topic because not only is it just a massive amount of work, but people spend a lot of money on this now. There are consultants, there are multiple applications. It's a whole thing. I didn't have a consultant when I did this. That wasn't really, it existed, but it wasn't as sort of like normalized as it is today. But people are spending big money on this stuff. And, I have to say that having had friends who've used these consultants, I was a little underwhelmed by what I saw. There's some good ones, but it's just very much, I don't know. It's a process. And I feel like when you take a person who's working with a large number of people, they end up kind of giving people sort of very similar applications. So that was my experience. I was a little underwhelmed. That being said, it is a thing. The other thing is people apply to a lot of schools these days. So that's a whole other factor. And how many schools should you apply to? Which ones? All that sort of stuff. So I talked about this last week a little bit, sort of the reality is find something that maps to what you want to do and be very selective because it's a lot of investment of time and money. And so going to a school that's not that great, it's not going to pay off, in my opinion, unless you have other reasons for doing it or you get a big scholarship. But for the rest of us, no. So there are a lot of different factors to contemplate, but at the end of the day, the application and the process of applying is pretty straightforward. You got the GMAT, the essays, recommendations, and of course, your interview. So we're going to talk about those 4 elements today on PatGPT. Ready? And start generating. So, let's start with the old GMAT. So the GMAT is super, super important. I'm telling you, it is a way to stick out of the crowd. If you nail the GMAT, you just get bonus points. And so you just really substantiate a lot of things. And at the end of the day, this is a numbers game. Now, I took us off. I really did. I studied so hard for the GMAT. I started studying about 3 months in advance. And there's a really amazing book that the GMAT test people make. I just used that book. I actually tried to take a prep class, but I was always too busy to go, so I never did it. But I just used the book that you had, sort of sold for all the questions. And I used the strategies from the test prep book. I think it was Kaplan. So I had bought that book and there's good strategies, especially on some of these multiple choices and the reading. There's some cool, very shortcutty things you can do. Like when you do the reading, you read the questions first. And then when you read the reading assignment, therefore you sort of know what to look for, stuff like that, little things to save time. But to be honest with you, that's all I did. And I think just doing the questions over and over and over again so you can pattern recognize. Because at the end of the day, there's only so many questions you can ask. So once you start to see the patterns, you're like, oh, I know how these questions work. Then you can move through quickly. And when you take the GMAT, really be smart about time. You don't want to get to the end and have 15 minutes left over. No. The other thing is when you get to the math, you're going to do this test and it's going to get harder and easier depending on how things are going. Don't try to psychoanalyze the test. Don't do it because it may get easier because you hit a really hard one and then it sort of backs off. So you can psych yourself out that way. But I do remember when you get that really first hard math one, give yourself time. Really try to move quickly through the ones that you can work on so that you can save time for yourself on the hard ones and not be rushed at the end of the test. That's really critical to getting a high score. I was really lucky. I got a 770. I studied hard, I guess luck and also just, sort of preparation, but much higher than I'd done on the SAT or anything like that. And it really, once you get that GMAT, you think if it's a good score you're happy with, it really opens doors to schools you want to apply to. All right, we're going to come back with the rest right after this break.
FOMO.
All right, this is PatGPT, and we are back talking about how to get into your MBA program. Okay, we talked about the GMAT. Now it's time for the essays. Okay, these are really important. And this is where I think the consultants get it wrong. They're not all bad, but it's just, I don't know. I'm very picky. I write books. So I thought deeply about this. And the way I thought about the essays is think of everything you want to possibly convey in your application. And the essays are a way to make a collage that says all those things in ways that are complete and reinforcing. So you want to sort of think about how to use each of the essays to touch upon the various aspects of your life, professional, personal, what makes you stand out, sharing why you're different, what is your unique selling proposition, all that sort of stuff. And so therefore, writing everything you want to convey on a sticky note, sticking them on the wall, and then sort of like aligning them with the different essays or parts of the essays and making sure that everything has its little place, that right there is super critical. And especially knowing what the school values. So some schools are all about, finance. Some are about leadership. Some are about giving back and social consciousness. So understanding what the school cares about and then making sure that that's also in your essays is deeply important. Do these early, start early. Let people read them, but not too many people, because then it becomes analysis paralysis. And the great thing about writing these essays is that you actually learn a lot about yourself. And so it is a valuable experience about why you're doing this, where you're going, who you are as a person at that point in your life. And so it's a wonderful way to get to know you a little bit better, which is a valuable part of the whole MBA process. So do not worry about the essays, but just be strategic about what you want to say and to whom and how, the messages you're sending across. Next, recommendations. Here's the big thing not to do. I was told when I was applying to business school, my firm had a couple people who had gone to HBS, and I was told, you must have a recommendation from this person. And I was like, well, I didn't work with him and he doesn't really know me. And so I didn't do that. I went to people who knew me. I was doing venture capital. So I did a company we had invested in. I did my boss. And I did one other person from college, a professor. And those people all knew me and respected me and wrote great recos. And I'm going to tell you something. Some of the people who got that, really well-known person who gave a lot of money to the school to write their reco did not get in. So I'm convinced that, it helps if they know you well, great. But again, it's, a lot of people get, I remember a guy, he got like the president of a country to write him a reco. He didn't get in because they want to know who you are, not who you know, right? It's all about trying to find great people for the class. Of course, there are people I'm sure who pull strings. It's obviously happening. But for the rest of us who can't do that, we need to really give people a chance to know why we're special and why we should be part of the class. Finally, interview. Interview is a great opportunity to round out what it says in the application. But the most important thing about the interview is the questions you ask of the interviewer. Be thoughtful. Use the questions to say who you are, to tell the person more about you. I remember I had a couple of hard questions I prepped for. It was like, what are your 3 strengths and weaknesses, stuff like that. We did the little intro bit, but my interview from business school, both of them were conversations. We ended up talking about Latin American film. I remember with the admissions person that interviewed me for HBS. So I kind of knew that things went well because we were just kind of getting to know each other. And I really love that. And by the way, I flew up on both of these schools. I went the night before. I sat in my hotel room and I just interviewed myself and did the questions out loud. That really helps to practice out loud. You can practice with a friend. You can find a million things online. I'm telling you, it's analysis paralysis, but it makes a difference to at least prepare some of them. So those are my pieces of advice, I should say. I think it's a really important and fun process if you do it right, and it doesn't have to be scary. That's all I have for you today. If you have any questions or want to talk about it, or you have recommendations, reach out at Patrick J. McGinnis at Instagram, PJ McGinnis at X, and let's connect at patrickmcginnis.com. All right, PatGPT, stop generating. FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me at FOMOSapiens.com and at PatrickMcGinnis.com. To advertise on FOMO Sapiens, reach out to contact@FOMOSapiens.com.